Thanks for tuning in to Operation Revenge. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin the story. The banquet hall smelled like polished wood, expensive cologne, and overpriced hors d'oeuvres. My father's 40th anniversary at his company was the kind of event where everything was carefully curated to look effortless, just like the life he'd built. I stood off to the side, quietly nursing a glass of water, feeling more disconnected from my family than I had in years. My older brother Jack stood at the center of the room, laughing with a small group of people. He looked the part: tailored suit, perfect haircut, charm turned up to 10. Everyone loved Jack. It was hard to miss how my father's eyes followed him, how my mother practically glowed with pride. Jack, the heir to my father's corporate kingdom. I'd always been the disappointment. "So, Lena, still figuring it out?" Jack's voice cut through the noise as he turned toward me, a smirk playing on his lips. "Still avoiding the real world, huh?" I didn't even look up from the phone in my hand. It was just easier to pretend to be busy, to hide behind the screen. I typed a quick message, but I couldn't stop hearing Jack's voice, laced with that patronizing tone that always managed to make me feel small. I had quit medical school years ago, turned my back on the path they wanted for me. Instead, I had built a tech company from the ground up, focusing on health tech. It was one of the few things I'd kept to myself. I couldn't stand the way my family would judge me for my unconventional choices. So, I let them think I was still a mess, still scrambling to figure things out. Jack wasn't done. "Not everyone is lucky enough to have it all figured out by our age, huh?" he said, not even bothering to lower his voice. "Some of us are still trying to get it right." My fingers paused over the screen of my phone, the sting of his words settling in. I wasn't sure why it still hurt. I was used to it by now. The jabs, the way he'd always try to make me feel like the failure of the family. I took a deep breath, typing a response to a potential partner, all while Jack's voice buzzed in the background. "You really should give up on all that startup nonsense," he said. "You'd be a lot better off with something more stable. You know, like a real career." I muttered, tapping out another message. My phone buzzed in my hand. I glanced down, seeing an incoming call from VERIDIAN HEALTH, a $2 billion deal hanging in the balance. I couldn't help but smile to myself. Jack cleared his throat, stepping up to the microphone at the front of the room. I knew what was coming. He was the golden child, the one everyone expected to succeed. But for some reason, he always made sure to throw in a little dig at me, especially when he had an audience. He adjusted the mic and smiled like he was the next great motivational speaker. "I want to take a moment to thank my dad," Jack began, his voice smooth, calculated. 40 years of hard work, dedication, and building something from nothing. He's a true example of what it means to never give up, to push through when the odds are stacked against you. The crowd clapped, some of them probably looking at my dad like he was some kind of god. His chest puffed out, a big grin spreading across his face. Jack's tone shifted, just slightly. And, of course, we all know what he's taught us along the way, about work ethic, about sacrifice. "My sister, Lena," he paused, making sure everyone knew he was talking about me. "Well, she's still finding herself." A couple of nervous chuckles rippled through the room. I kept my eyes on my phone, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I wasn't going to let him have that moment. Jack's eyes flicked toward me, the smirk still in place, like he was savoring the moment. "Some of us know where we're headed. Others, well, they're still figuring it out." His voice was pitched just high enough for people to hear the slight bite. The message was clear. I was the one still stuck in the searching for purpose phase. The one who hadn't made it. My mother shifted in her seat, awkwardly adjusting her purse, eyes darting between Jack and me. "Jack, don't," she muttered under her breath, but it was too late. I forced myself to stay still, to stay calm. I'd learned to breathe through this. I couldn't even remember the last time Jack hadn't taken a jab at me at one of these things. It was just part of the routine. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my investor. I swiped it away, keeping my face neutral. Jack didn't pause. He went right on. "But, you know, we all have our own path. I'm just glad Dad's here, showing us how to lead, how to build something solid and reliable." I glanced at the screen of my phone for a second and saw the name on the incoming call. VERIDIAN HEALTH. My breath caught in my chest. I hesitated for a moment, watching Jack, knowing full well he was setting me up for some kind of humiliation. But this was the one moment where I had a choice. This call could change everything. I stood up slowly, excusing myself as I walked out of the ballroom and into the quieter hallway. I wasn't sure if anyone even noticed I was gone. I hit accept. Lena? The voice on the other end was calm, professional. This is Sarah from VERIDIAN HEALTH. I'm calling to confirm we're ready to move forward with the acquisition. Our board just approved the $2 billion deal for your company. Congratulations. My heart skipped a beat. I could barely process the words, but I knew exactly what she was saying. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm looking forward to getting the final paperwork sorted. I could feel the weight of everything shifting, the world starting to tilt in my favor. But then, just as I was about to end the call, I glanced back toward the banquet hall through the glass doors. I saw Jack's face as he continued his speech, unaware of what was about to hit the room. Please hold for just a moment, I said into the phone, walking back toward the doors. I didn't need to say anything else, just let the noise speak for itself. I swung open the doors, stepping back into the room. Jack's voice trailed off as I walked to the table. People were still laughing at something he said, not paying attention to me yet. I cleared my throat, drawing attention, before I spoke into the phone, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sorry about that, I'm on a call with VERIDIAN HEALTH. They just confirmed the acquisition for $2 billion, my health tech startup. The deal's going through. The room went silent instantly. All eyes were on me. Even Jack's polished smirk faltered, and I could see his brain trying to catch up. There was a long pause, the kind of awkward silence that makes everyone shift in their seats. I couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction. It wasn't the way I wanted to make my entrance into this conversation, but it was real. I continued, calm but clear. The company's been growing under the radar for a while. It's AI-driven diagnostics in healthcare, revolutionary stuff. I glanced over at Jack, who was now staring at me, his mouth slightly open. My mother blinked in confusion. My father was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Maybe pride or disbelief? I wasn't sure. The deal closes soon, I added, just to make sure everyone understood. But don't worry, I'm not looking for a seat at the family table just yet. The murmur spread through the room like wildfire. My phone buzzed again with another notification, but this time I didn't look. I just let the silence sit for a moment longer, letting everyone process. I held the phone to my ear, watching my family, waiting for the tension in the room to settle. The air felt thick, like the weight of their disbelief was pressing in on me. Lena? Sarah's voice crackled through the line. Are you there? I cleared my throat. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that. Just had to step away for a second. So, the deal is officially confirmed? Absolutely, Sarah said, her tone warm, confident. The acquisition is locked in for $2 billion. VERIDIAN Health is excited to move forward with your company. Your health diagnostic system is groundbreaking. We're looking forward to scaling it nationwide. I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting for this moment, for the confirmation, for everything to finally fall into place. Thanks, Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady. I appreciate it. We've put a lot of work into getting to this point. We're solving a real problem in healthcare with the AI-powered diagnostics. This is just the beginning. I paused, letting that sink in. The moment felt surreal, but the silence in the room was the real indication that this was bigger than I'd expected. My family hadn't fully absorbed what I was saying yet. They were still trying to catch up. Jack stood frozen, mouth half open, his face pale. He hadn't said a word since I'd dropped the bombshell, and I wasn't sure he was even processing it. My father's eyes were wide, his hands now clutched tightly in front of him. He looked like he'd just been slapped. My mother's face was flushed with confusion, her brows furrowed like she'd just missed a punchline. I swallowed hard. I've kept the business pretty low-key, I continued, still speaking into the phone but now addressing the room, for security and personal reasons. I didn't want to draw attention to it. So, yeah, you all wouldn't have heard much about it. The words were cold and final. They hung in the air like a cloud, slowly turning into something dense and heavy. My mom's eyes flickered back and forth, as if waiting for someone else to confirm what I was saying. But there was no mistake. The truth was out. I glanced around the room, trying to gauge their reactions. Jack was the first to blink. His mouth snapped shut, and his gaze fell to the table in front of him. It was clear he didn't know how to reconcile the Lena he thought he knew with the one standing here now. Dad didn't look at me at all. Instead, his eyes were fixed on the floor, his face gone a shade paler than before. It was like I'd taken a wrecking ball to the carefully constructed image they'd built of me over the years. You... My mother's voice broke through the silence, her words trailing off as if she was trying to piece it all together. You've been doing this all along? I nodded slowly. Yes, it's been a few years now. I didn't want to burden anyone, so I kept it private. But we didn't know, she said, a slight edge of panic creeping into her voice. I had no idea. No, I said quietly. I didn't want you to. I didn't want anyone to get involved. I built this on my own. The startup, the funding, everything. It had to stay under the radar. Jack's voice broke the silence, and I could hear the frustration in his tone. You were hiding this from us? All these years? I didn't look at him when I responded. It wasn't hiding. It was strategy. And it was for my own peace of mind. Peace of mind? He shot back. You're telling me this entire time you've been making billions and you didn't think we deserved to know? He shook his head, disbelief lacing his words. How does that even make sense? It makes sense if you understand what I've been dealing with, I said, my voice calm but firm. I had to get here without anyone else's influence, especially yours. Jack's face turned red. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. It was clear he was still trying to process the magnitude of what I'd just revealed. My father, who'd barely said anything since the announcement, suddenly looked up, his eyes narrowing. You could have told us. We could have helped. I didn't want your help, I said, finally meeting his gaze. I didn't need it. I was trying to build something real, not just play by your rules. A tense silence filled the space between us. The murmurs of shock spread throughout the room, barely audible but clearly growing. The weight of the $2 billion was hanging in the air like a fog. Lena, my mother started, but she faltered, unsure of what to say next. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she didn't meet my eyes. I had no idea. I know, I said softly, but there was no warmth behind it. I didn't want you to, and I didn't want to have to explain myself to anyone. My father's voice was quieter now, tinged with an unfamiliar edge. But this whole time you never mentioned it. Not once? I shook my head. I didn't want the attention. I didn't need to be in the spotlight. I just wanted to build something that mattered. Jack still wasn't speaking. He was staring at his hands, and I could tell he was struggling with this new version of me. I didn't feel sorry for him. I had no reason to. The room had shifted. The silence had turned into an uncomfortable hum, the kind you can't ignore. People were looking at me differently now, curious, wary, and maybe a little intimidated, and I didn't know how I felt about that. I wasn't sure I cared anymore. Well, I said, breaking the quiet, I think I've said enough. The weight of the $2 billion deal was starting to settle on me. It was real now, and I was still trying to figure out how I felt about it. Jack finally blinked, shaking his head like he was trying to wake up from a dream. His eyes narrowed at me, still struggling to process everything. His face flushed a deep red, a mix of embarrassment and anger that I couldn't quite decipher. You, he stammered, then cleared his throat. How did you even pull this off? You were struggling not long ago. And now? This? He gestured at me, as if I were some kind of magic trick he couldn't figure out. You're telling me this whole time you've been sitting on this? 2 billion? I didn't flinch. Yes, I said. I've been building it quietly, keeping things low profile. Jack's gaze was fixed on me, sharp and demanding. How? I don't get it. How did you go from failing out of med school to this? I met his eyes, not backing down. I started small, in my apartment. I didn't have investors at first, just an idea and some code. I spent my nights and weekends writing software, figuring out the health diagnostic system. It was slow. It was messy. But I stuck with it. The words were coming out smoother now, almost mechanical. I wasn't even angry anymore. I'd gotten to this point because I'd kept my head down, because I'd had to prove something to myself. But it was clear Jack still didn't get it. But how did you get the funding? He pressed, his voice still disbelieving. If you didn't go to med school, didn't you need money to start all this? Did you have investors? Did someone help? I felt a shift in the air as I realized what he was really asking. I stood taller, pushing past the urge to stay quiet. I had played by their rules for long enough. Yeah, I had some help, I said slowly, my voice low but deliberate. You and Mom and Dad helped me out over the years, for living expenses, for rent, for bills. I didn't tell you what I was doing with it, but you knew. You kept sending money, and I used it to build this, while everyone assumed I was still figuring things out. Jack recoiled, his face contorting with something close to shock. What? You're telling me? He stopped, his breath catching in his throat. We've been paying for this? I nodded, meeting his eyes head on. Yes, you were helping me build the business, all while thinking I was failing or struggling. I could feel my mother shift in her seat, a look of guilt spreading across her face. She spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. Lena, I didn't know it was for that. I know, I said softly, but with no warmth. I didn't want you to. You didn't need to know. There was a long pause as Jack looked between me and our parents, still trying to make sense of what I'd just revealed. The silence was heavy now, like the air in the room was thickening with every second. Finally, Jack blinked and let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, his voice tight with a mix of disbelief and frustration. So, you've been using our money, and I'm supposed to just be okay with that? I didn't flinch. I didn't ask for it. You offered. But I did it on my own terms. I built this company without ever asking for more than you already gave me. I didn't ask you to get involved in the decisions. I didn't need your advice or your approval. I did it my way. Jack's expression twisted, and he opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off. You've borrowed money from mom and dad multiple times, I said, my voice colder now, and you never had a problem with it. But I do it quietly, without making a spectacle. And suddenly it's a big issue? Jack froze, his face flushing an even darker red. His eyes darted to our parents, a brief look of guilt flashing across his face before he looked back at me. I couldn't stop myself. You've never really earned anything, Jack. You've always had help, always had someone else to bail you out. And now you're looking at me like I'm the one who's been doing it wrong? My mother was looking at me with wide, apologetic eyes, her lips trembling. Lena, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I know, I repeated, a little softer this time. It's not your fault. I never wanted you to know. I didn't want to deal with the expectations, the judgment, the pressure. It's easier when no one knows what I'm doing. It's been easier to stay out of everyone's way. Jack opened his mouth again, but this time, he didn't have an immediate response. He just stared at me, his face hard, like he was trying to process everything. The room was still. I could feel the weight of their thoughts pressing in, but it didn't feel like my problem anymore. I'd carried the weight for so long, and now it was on them to reconcile who they thought I was with the reality that had been hiding in plain sight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, Jack dropped his gaze to the table, his shoulders slumping slightly. He didn't apologize. He didn't admit he was wrong. But there was something in his eyes that shifted, something like grudging respect. Or maybe it was just the reality that his image of me had been shattered. But I didn't care about that anymore. I didn't care if he was angry or confused or even ashamed. The only thing that mattered now was that I had built this, and I had done it without them, without their expectations, without their interference. So, I said, breaking the silence, that's the story. If you want to keep trying to make sense of it, be my guest. But don't expect me to explain myself any further. The silence in the room was so thick, it felt like it had weight. No one moved, no one spoke. My parents sat frozen at the table, my father still staring at the floor, my mother looking like she wanted to crawl under the table. Jack was holding himself together, but I could see the frustration and confusion written all over his face. He didn't know what to make of me anymore. I looked around the room, at the people who had applauded my father's success, who had laughed at Jack's jokes, who had never given me a second thought. Now, all eyes were on me. I stood up and walked toward the microphone. It felt like a deliberate choice, not a dramatic one, just one I had to make. No one else was going to do this for me. The crowd parted slightly, like they were trying to make space for me, but I wasn't sure what I was walking into. I didn't care. I picked up the mic. First off, I want to thank my father, I began, my voice steady, for showing me what it means to work hard, to stick with something even when it feels like it's not going your way. I've learned a lot from him. But I also want to point out that I followed a different path. The words felt oddly natural, like they had been sitting on my tongue for a long time, waiting for the right moment. I've never been the corporate type, I continued. I didn't follow the rules. I didn't take the expected path. I walked away from med school and built something entirely on my own. I paused, letting the words settle. The crowd's stunned silence was giving way to a subtle hum, people whispering to one another. Someone in the back pulled out their phone and started searching, their screen lighting up in the darkened room. I could see people checking my name, typing, waiting for the confirmation. They were all trying to catch up to me. And in case you were wondering, I said, my voice firm now, my company's acquisition is closing soon for $2 billion. Not bad for a failure, Right, Jack? I could hear Jack's sharp intake of breath, but I didn't look at him. I wasn't here for him or for anyone's approval. This was my moment. The whispers around the room grew louder. People's phones were lighting up with information. The energy had shifted again, but this time it was palpable, a mix of awe, disbelief, and curiosity. I know a lot of you have seen me as someone who hasn't lived up to expectations, I went on, pacing slightly as I spoke. I know I've been the family disappointment, but what I've done, what my company has done, is revolutionize healthcare. We've transformed how diagnostics work with AI, providing more accurate, faster, and cheaper solutions. The real success isn't in the money, it's in solving a real problem. It's in changing lives. I looked out over the crowd, my gaze steady but unflinching. For years, people have assumed I was failing when all I was doing was building. You saw my struggle, but you didn't see my work. You saw what wasn't happening and ignored what was. I spent all this time under the radar because I knew the truth. I knew I wasn't failing. I was just getting started. The room was still buzzing, though now it was less about confusion and more about curiosity. People were leaning forward, phones raised, eyes wide. But I wasn't done. I'm not here to apologize for not following the path you thought I should. I'm not here to make anyone feel better about their assumptions. The truth is, I didn't want your help because I didn't need it. I didn't want your interference. I built this my way, and it's worked. I stopped pacing, my hands still gripping the microphone. I could see my father's face, pale but still composed, watching me like he was trying to figure out if he should be proud or shocked. I could feel my mother's eyes, filled with something that looked almost like regret. But let's get one thing straight, I said, locking eyes with Jack for the first time. I'm not some charity case. I never asked you for anything but space. If I'm standing here now, it's because I've worked harder than you'll ever know. The crowd's whispers were now growing louder, turning into a hum of speculation. People were Googling my company, trying to piece together the details. But I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about me, about making sure my story wasn't buried in the assumptions they'd built around me for years. I don't need anyone to tell me I've done well, I said, my voice strong. This success, it's not about the money. It's about solving a real problem. It's about making healthcare better. So when you think about me, don't think about the failure. Don't think about the person you thought I was. Think about the person I've become and the lives we've changed. I let the words sink in for a moment, giving the room a chance to absorb everything. It was quiet again, but this time it felt different. The crowd wasn't just shocked. They were listening, and for once, it felt like they were seeing me for who I really was. I lowered the microphone, nodding once to the room. Before walking back to my seat, Jack didn't look at me. My parents were staring at me, and I could feel the weight of their silence, their realization. But it didn't matter. I had said what needed to be said, I had made my point, and I was done explaining myself. I returned to my seat, not bothering to look at Jack, but I could feel his eyes drilling into the back of my head. The room still hummed with energy, the aftermath of my speech lingering in the air. My father was the first to break the silence, his voice surprisingly soft. "Lena," he began, and I could hear the weight in his words. "Did you really need to be so secretive all these years?" I felt the familiar knot tighten in my stomach, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. I had to answer this, calmly, clearly. "Yes," I said simply. It was the only way I could work without the distractions, without anyone questioning my choices, the expectations, the constant pressure. If I'd told you what I was doing, I wouldn't have gotten the space I needed. You would have wanted to interfere, tell me what to do, where to go, and I couldn't have that, not if I was ever going to make it. I didn't flinch, even as my father's face tightened. I knew what he was thinking. He was still caught between being proud of my success and being hurt that I had kept it from him. But I wasn't apologizing. I couldn't. Jack scoffed under his breath. "This is bullshit." His voice was tight, his jaw clenched. "You think that was necessary? Keeping all of this a secret from the people who've supported you for years? It's manipulative, Lena." I didn't react. "It's strategic," I said coolly, keeping my tone even. I couldn't afford to let anyone influence my decisions. You've always been quick to judge, to put me down. I couldn't work under that microscope. Jack looked like he was going to argue further, but my mother spoke up before he could. Her voice cracked as she looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt. I never knew, Lena. I'm so sorry. I didn't believe in you. I didn't know you were doing all this. I thought you were still struggling." She started to cry, a few tears slipping down her cheeks. I stared at her, the words catching in my throat for a moment. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't going to coddle her either. "It's okay, Mom," I said quietly. "You didn't know, and I didn't want you to. I didn't want anyone to see me as the failure you all thought I was. The truth is, I didn't need your belief in me to get here. I did it for myself." She wiped her eyes, still shaking her head. "I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I should have supported you, trusted you more." I didn't say anything else. What was there to say? She had her regrets, and I had mine. The truth was, I hadn't wanted their support. It wasn't that I didn't want them to believe in me, I just couldn't work if I had to keep justifying my choices. And it had been easier, less painful, to just stay out of their way. Jack cut in again, his voice tense. "Look, Lena, I know I said some stuff earlier, but I was just..." He paused, taking a breath. "I was wrong. I didn't know all this. I didn't know what you were really doing." I didn't look at him. I could feel the apology hanging in the air, but I wasn't interested. He wasn't the person who needed to apologize. My success wasn't about making him feel better about the way he'd treated me for all these years. "I don't need you to apologize, Jack," I said, my voice flat. "You didn't know, and I didn't care to explain myself. What matters now is what I've done, not what you think of me. The only reason I'm sitting here is because I built this on my own." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his fingers tapping the edge of the table, but he didn't say anything more. He wasn't ready to admit he was wrong, and I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of letting him think that I was. The tension in the air grew thicker. My mother was still sniffling, her gaze lingering on me with that mixture of guilt and confusion. My father, though, had gone silent again, his eyes clouded with thoughts I couldn't read. I could see how this was shaking him, how he was processing it all, from the years of assuming I was failing to realizing that I'd been quietly succeeding in a way none of them could have imagined. I looked around the table, my heart thudding a little in my chest. The success, the money, the deal, it wasn't the point anymore. What mattered was that they had finally seen the truth. They had finally seen me, even if they didn't quite understand me yet. The thing was, I was still the same person I'd always been. I wasn't the failure they'd thought I was. But I wasn't sure I'd ever fully fit into the family dynamic again. And maybe that was okay. I leaned back in my chair, my hands folded in front of me. "I'm still the same person," I said, breaking the silence. "Even if the world sees me differently now, I didn't change. You just didn't know who I really was." There was no immediate response, just the soft murmur of voices from the rest of the room. I didn't need them to say anything. I didn't need their approval. The truth had been said. And for once, I was okay with that. I sat back in my chair, letting the quiet wash over me. The room had finally settled, but the weight of everything still hung in the air. The truth was out, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to hide or explain. But there was no sense of victory, no surge of triumph like I'd expected. Instead, I felt distant, detached, almost. The applause, the congratulatory looks, they felt hollow. The weight of all those years spent pretending to be unsuccessful, pretending to be the failure everyone expected. It wasn't gone in a single moment. And now that they knew the truth, I wasn't sure what to do with it. I had worked through so many nights and weekends in my small apartment, the only company I had being the glow of my computer screen. The loneliness had been overwhelming at times. I remembered the sting of being overlooked by my family, their whispers of concern when I dropped out of med school, the judgmental comments from friends who thought I was throwing my life away. For years, I wore the mask of the disappointment. It was easier that way, less risky. I could disappear into the shadows, avoid the prying eyes, and work in peace. But now, sitting here, with the truth finally exposed, I couldn't shake the unease that lingered. Everyone was congratulating me, but it didn't feel like success. It felt like obligation. Like the world was telling me, "You made it, so now we expect something from you." My phone buzzed. I glanced down, seeing a flood of notifications lighting up my screen. People were congratulating me, sharing news about the acquisition. VERIDIAN HEALTH, $2 billion. The deal had just gone public. For a moment, I thought it would feel different, like this huge weight would lift off me. But all I felt was a strange emptiness. The buzz from the phone grew louder, more congratulatory messages, more people tagging me on social media. The notifications stacked up faster than I could keep up. I shoved the phone back in my bag. It wasn't the validation I thought it would be. I didn't need this constant stream of praise. I'd lived for so long in a space where I had no one's expectations weighing on me, no one to tell me what I should be doing. The silence had been a relief, the freedom of being just me, with no one watching, no one measuring. Now, with all of this success and all the eyes on me, I wondered if I could still hold on to that. I wasn't sure I could, and that scared me. Just as I was starting to let the quiet settle back around me, my phone rang again. It was Jack. I hesitated before answering, my thumb hovering over the screen. I knew what was coming, another apology, another attempt at smoothing things over. But I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. I swiped to answer. Hey, Lena. Jack's voice was strained, like he wasn't sure how to say the words. I just wanted to apologize for everything. I didn't understand. I didn't know what you were doing all this time, and I didn't handle it the right way. I was an asshole. I stayed quiet for a second, trying to figure out what I wanted to say. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't feel that fire in my chest, the one that used to make me want to yell at him every time he dismissed me. But I didn't feel like forgiving him either. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Thanks, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I hear you. But it's not something I'm going to just forget. I know, he said quickly. I get it. I don't know, Lena. I didn't see it. I didn't see what you were doing, and I'm sorry. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, the silence stretching between us. Yeah, I finally said, sighing. I think we've both been pretending for a long time. Jack didn't respond right away, and I could hear him breathing, like he was waiting for me to say something more. But I didn't have anything else to add. I didn't need his apology anymore. It wasn't going to change anything. I'm not ready to fix everything yet, Jack, I said finally. Maybe I will be one day, but not today, and I don't know when. There was a long pause. Yeah, okay, I get it, he said, sounding defeated. I just want you to know I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you, even if I didn't show it. I didn't say anything for a moment. There was nothing more to say. I ended the call quietly, sinking back into my chair. The room was full of people still talking, laughing, congratulating each other, but it felt like I was floating above it all. The family dynamic had shifted. It would never be the same again. I could feel it in my bones. And that was okay. Because in the end, I was still me. The same person who had worked all those years in the shadows. The same person who had built something on her own, even when no one believed it could be done. I wasn't sure where this would go or what it all meant, but I knew I didn't need anyone else's approval anymore. I had built this, for better or worse, and I was going to keep building. The days after the announcement felt like a blur, a whirlwind of congratulations, interviews, and an overwhelming amount of attention. It was strange, being thrust into the spotlight when I'd spent so long avoiding it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being pulled in 1,000 directions, expected to know exactly what I wanted to do next. The pressure to keep moving, to make the next big leap, felt suffocating. But there was a part of me that wanted to hit pause and take a step back. I had agreed to stay on with the company as CTO for the next 2 years. It was part of the deal, but it also felt like a safe bet. After that, though, I didn't know. I couldn't decide if I wanted to keep pushing forward in the corporate world or if I was ready to move on entirely. It wasn't that I was dissatisfied with what I'd built. I was proud of the company, the impact it had made. But something about this world, with its expectations and its pressure to do something grand, didn't sit well with me. I didn't want to get caught up in the lifestyle people thought I should live now that I was successful. I didn't need a bigger house or a flashier car or even the endless stream of validation that everyone else seemed to thrive on. I just wanted to stay grounded in my values, to make decisions that were still my decisions, not ones shaped by what others thought was best for me. The phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was my mom, calling for the 3rd time that day. I'd been avoiding her calls, not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because I wasn't sure what to say. She still didn't quite understand everything that had happened, and I wasn't sure how to explain it to her. I picked up the phone. Hey, Mom. Lena, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I've been thinking about everything, and I'm so proud of you. You've done something incredible. I don't know if I told you that enough. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I kept my voice steady. Thanks, Mom. It means a lot to hear that. You've always had so much potential, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm so happy for you. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. I didn't need her validation, but it still felt good to hear it. I'd spent years trying to prove myself to her, to show her I was capable of more than the failure she thought I was. And now, even if it was a little late, I had the acknowledgement I needed. but it also made me nervous. I wasn't sure what the success would do to my relationships with her or with anyone else. I'm still figuring a lot of things out, Mom, I said, my voice quieter. I'm not sure what the next step is yet, but I appreciate your support. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing softly on the other end. I just want you to be happy, Lena. I want you to do whatever feels right for you. I will, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. There was a part of me that feared the future, that dreaded the change that success might bring. Not the kind of change that would be good, but the kind that would distance me from the people who had once seen me as the disappointment. I hung up with her, my mind still swirling. Just as I set the phone down, I saw Jack walking toward me across the room. His expression was softer now, less guarded than it had been before. He looked like he was trying to approach me with caution, which made me uneasy. I wasn't sure how I felt about him anymore, let alone how we could go back to anything resembling the relationship we once had. "Lena?" he said, stopping a few feet away. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear his words. I wasn't sure I was ready to let the past go, not yet. "I just want to say," he started, running a hand through his hair, "that I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how I treated you, and I'm sorry. For all of it. For not believing in you. For all the times I doubted you." I looked at him, trying to process what he was saying. I wasn't angry anymore, but there was a part of me that was still holding on to the way he'd treated me for so long. The assumption that I would always be the screw-up. "I hear you," I said quietly, "but I need time to figure out where we stand. This success changes things more than you realize. I'm not sure I can just forgive and forget, Jack. Not right now." He nodded slowly, his face falling a little. "I get it. I don't expect you to just let it go. I just wanted to say it. I wanted to apologize, and I hope we can figure this out eventually." I didn't answer him right away, but I could feel the distance between us widening. I didn't know if that was something I wanted to fix, and part of me was okay with that. As Jack walked away, I found myself smiling, a small, quiet smile that had nothing to do with the deal or the company. It had everything to do with the fact that, for the first time in years, I wasn't defined by anyone else's expectations. I was no longer the disappointment. I was Lena, the person who had built something real. And the future? It was full of possibilities, and I was ready to see where it would take me. I stepped out of the banquet hall and into the cool night air, the hum of the party still echoing in the distance. The parking lot was quiet, and as I walked toward my car, I felt the weight of everything finally start to settle. The tension from the night, from all the years of pretending and hiding, was slowly melting away. The car I'd been driving for years, modest, practical, nothing flashy, sat in the corner of the lot, as unassuming as ever. I didn't need anything more than this. It wasn't about status or appearances. It was about comfort, about keeping things simple. And that had always been enough for me. I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar scent of leather and the hum of the engine grounding me. As I drove out of the lot and onto the quiet streets, I felt a strange peace. It wasn't the kind of peace I had imagined after all this success, the kind I'd expected to feel when everyone finally knew what I'd accomplished. It was something else, something deeper. It was the peace of knowing I'd stayed true to who I was, despite everything. The world could change around me, and I could keep moving forward, but nothing had changed at my core. I was still the same person who had spent those long nights alone, building something that no one could see, that no one could understand. And that person was enough. I thought about my father's lesson, the one he'd taught me without even realizing it. Success came from hard work, from dedication, from pushing through when things were tough. But the real lesson, the one that had taken me years to figure out, was trusting my own journey, trusting that I knew what I was doing, even when no one else did. I'd spent so many years wondering if I was doing the right thing, if I was on the right path. But tonight, after everything that had been said and done, I knew for sure I was on my path. I didn't need anyone else to validate it, to tell me I'd made it. I had already made it in my own way. The city was quiet as I drove through the streets, the lights flickering through the trees, casting shadows on the pavement. There was a peace in the stillness, in the simplicity of the moment, the kind of peace I hadn't realized I'd been searching for. I smiled to myself, the weight of the night lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't the disappointment anymore. I wasn't the person they all thought I was. And I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, not my family, not the world. I'd built something real, and that was enough. As I turned the corner and headed down the road, I knew my next steps would come when the time was right. There were still things I wanted to do, things I wanted to create. But for the first time, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel the need to have it all figured out. I just needed to keep building, keep trusting myself. The rest would follow.